there's a lot more, but you can see there's the difference. And when the diameter line is crossed by a vertical one, it becomes a Mandan cross. So what happened? They haven't young Li impregnated the Mandan egg, the word yin, or in the Bible, let there be light. The spirit manifested into matter. Or in quantum mechanics, that the collapse of probability waves turns into matter. Or the implicate order unfolded into explicate order. See, in China, you see, the Tao that can be named is not the real Tao, so you cannot see this. This is gone, the symbol of T, the Tao. In Egypt, there's a little loop in there, you've got the Ankh. So this is two different. But see, with the quantum physics now, actually you can see that when I turn around with the densities, you can see this here. This is like the speed of light, the border between no form and form. This is a time-space continuum, and that's beyond time, beyond space. And if you see also in everything, that's the interaction between this and this. Spirit, call it, I don't know, just lack of words, call it spirit and matter. The interaction between spirit and matter, this one. Or the interaction between spirit and matter symbolized by the vertical axis create consciousness. This is my definition. Nobody has ever defined consciousness. Agreed into one. What is consciousness?
What I read last night was time was created to allow consciousness to exist.
Now, I'm proposing one other model here. Because there is a, between spirit and matter, there's interaction that create or raise the consciousness, the axis. Now, shall I move on or shall I stay here?
Well, let's put it this way, okay? The horizontal line, if it goes right down to the bottom, it's not very in touch with the higher vibrations, but very coarse vibrations.
No, at this time it's actually only
At the bottom.
divided between.
Yeah, but if you take that as a continuum from top to bottom, from heavy to light in a similar waves or waveform, heavy, dense, light up here. Is that what you were saying about the vertical line before? The vertical line can be interpreted as either spiritual or high vibration, and the bottom is dense. Hence, the horizontal line must go down with it or up with it. So,
I don't know. That's probably your interpretation, yeah.
okay.
But probably you got mixed up with my picture later on. You have seen. So this one, you got this. The circle is the source, and then you got the horizontal, and you got the vertical. So the vertical is the esoteric axis, is the axis us. The vertical axis symbolizes the interaction between spirit and matter polarity. It symbolizes the subject pattern. That can be anything from a simple pattern like a light particle to a complex pattern like human or galaxy or even super universe. That's the axis. The interaction between spirit and matter creates consciousness within the subject matter. And the degree of consciousness directly relates to the complexity of the subject matter. Like a photon or particle has got this axis as well, but their consciousness is not as complex as human consciousness. But human consciousness probably also not as complex as the galaxy. So probably like a particle can relate to our body, to our cell, to our particle, but they can't even no imagination of what human being can do or conscious about. So like we can see all the planets, all the galaxy, but we cannot even imagine what consciousness this galaxy or universe has. No idea. It's far beyond us. So this law of polarization is also known as the universal law of free will. So it's our free will to be human, to be on this planet, to be male or female, or if we want to be something else, it's our free will. What counts is our experience. As the subject, we experience our surrounding. So at a human level, metaphorically, we can consider this as choosing also our attitude. Certain color of hat we are wearing to experience our surrounding. Like wearing a gray colored hat, we see the glass half empty, or wearing a rose colored hat, we see the glass half full. So that's our free will as well. Now the exoteric axis, the horizontal axis, it symbolizes the interaction between subject and the surrounding subject, the object. Due to principle of resonance and induction, whatever the subject can perceive from surroundings only depends on the subject pattern itself. Like our eyes can only perceive a certain bandwidth of light, red to violet, not beyond that. Our ears can also perceive certain bandwidth of sound. That's why we cannot hear with our eyes or see with our ears. So there is a certain resonance bandwidth that we can relate or resonate through. So wearing a clear color, let's see, now it is possible or even highly probable that there are many other universes sharing our space without us being aware of them, simply because they are vibrating beyond our resonance bandwidth. We are not talking, we don't need to talk about different dimensions. Just the frequency or the pattern different. For example, in Bali, when I was little, there's a lot of stories that people can see different civilizations. Not only the ghost, the jinn, but also like human beings. Children just gone missing for a week or two, playing around with and come back. Different civilization. Sharing our space, but adults cannot see them. Only children. Some children. We call it got blank. Orang Bunian.
What's that?
Got the name for it.
What's that mean?
Orang Bunian. It's a different. Orang is man. Like orang utan is the orang utan.
What did you say?
Bunian.
You said jinn, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jinn, ghost.
There's all different stories about that.
Yeah.
The concept of fallen angelic beings.
Yeah.
You know, you see the lamps, they rub that.
Yes.
That's what the jinn ended
Alibaba.
up. That's a concept.
Yeah.
The angelic beings. So what do the jinns look like?
Don't know.
I don't understand.
Or what are in my children books, the genes come from the lights. Alibaba, the light. Okay.
It's interesting.
But if you're Irish, they don't look quite different.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, but there is sometimes with drugs we can see them. Some children can see them. People say clairvoyance, tempered a little bit with our senses. We are peaking in our neighborhood.
In some way, Bung, it means that when we're talking about light as a vibration, or at least a wave, is it a bit like that these waves actually interact with each other to create a different pattern and therefore different material? Do you see it that way? I mean, we're talking about waves and patterns. They've got to get there somehow. Is that because one wave will interact with another wave somehow and create a different density or different wave pattern? I mean, how do they come about the wave patterns?
That's what the scientist is trying to do with the last hadron collider. Exactly how the first mass been created. That's the picture I had, the Large Hadron Collider, the particle accelerator. That's what they call the God particle. That's how they try to find out. I don't know the answer, Mary. You understand?
That's what I came for.
It's an interesting idea. If you look at the solar system, do you see a body? Do you see a being with 7 energy centers, like the 7 sacred planets being the energy centers? Just like if you look as a clairvoyant to someone and you see their chakras.
Well,
But there's a being there, which is the solar system.
somehow you have to have the interpretation of those patterns within you to be able to read them anyhow. So those patterns have to be able to be read by the mind. In the case of hearing, I hear the sound from your voice.
Yes.
That's a pattern, a wave pattern coming to my ear. Induction in my body, I hear sounds and interpret them.
What do you think of them field and patterns that show up in fields? You know, them geometric shapes that show up in fields? Yeah, crop circles.
A crop circle.
That's really interesting. That's a lot of geometry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just
You're talking about because there's so many synchronicity. The symbol turns up in the crop circle on the 12th of August. When I just finished doing these slides, I look in the internet. What? Crop circle is there? The symbol, the symbol with the dot.
I saw the circle with the dot representing in some very early ancient drawings as representing the sun. So the circle with the dot.
Yeah, there's so many interpretations. This is the symbol from this one.
Yeah.
As I interpreted, that's the awareness of the source, the dot, the source.
And in our limited vision, you could see the sun was the only reference of the source. So they put that as the dot that represented the sort of solar relationship with the sun. Almost like with the dot and circle is the only way they could express it.
There's so many
Were they
interpretations.
talking about the sun that we see, or were they talking about the sun which is the energy center
Yeah.
of love
Yeah.
and wisdom?
Mm.
In Heavenly Man, which is a center which is even bigger.
Yeah.
I don't
No, I don't know.
and that's the hard thing when we look at that and try and understand what they meant
Mm.
and what, like when the English came to Australia in 1700, they didn't see what the Aboriginals saw.
Mm.
So they assumed there was nothing there.
Yeah.
And we have the same problem looking at something that somebody wrote a few few thousand years ago, we don't
Yeah.
see what they did.
Because the Aboriginal couldn't perceive such an idea of a big thing sitting on the water.
Yeah.
It just wasn't comprehensible to them. So as soon as they looked at it, their eyes would flash away because that couldn't exist. That's what the mind was.
It's expectations.
But it's
That's what it
still,
is. We see because we have expectations. Uranus, when they found the planet, I told a guy today, he said, I'm thinking of my backside. I said, that's what I said, Uranus. From 1680 to 1790, there were 17 sightings. And back then they thought the lights was from the stars. So the expectation until the guy, what was his name, William Herschel, and he said it's an orbiting planet and everyone could see it. There's many discoveries. Another guy about Alfred, he's a meteorology, meteorologist about continental drift. And he looked at all the maps and he says, we're one country, one continent, it just split up. And they said, you're mad. He's an outcast, he died. But everyone knows it now. No one could see it. Our expectations stop us from seeing.
Our body, our mind isn't able to interpret it yet.
Yeah, if you expect something, you won't see it. I drive buses and I look at people's expectations. You see the body language. I said to an old guy on the bus, I said, just what you don't believe, just expand that belief that it's possible, just a little bit. And keep doing that. Keep doing that. And I said, in a month you'll feel 10 years younger. Because we're all shackled.
It's an interesting,
Can I
thing.
continue?
No.
No?
An interesting thing is the fact that we look at the sun and saying the light is coming to us at the speed of light. It's a pattern, it's a wave, it's also can be interpreted as a particle as well. This idea of seeing it as light, we interpret that wave coming at us as light, don't we? We see it as light. Yet we're talking about the whole universe being at the speed of light. If the speed of light doesn't necessarily mean only our interpretation sees it as white light coming at us, is that right? I mean, our brain has got to be able to say, oh, that's this light coming towards us. Our brain interprets the speed of light of that wave as light itself. But light itself, in another dimension, wouldn't be bright because we use our sense data to read it. So, in fact, the wave that you talk about, the universal wave of infinite light, is not necessarily how we interpret it with our physical mind.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to point out.
Because you see also the physical light is only that spectrum.
Yeah, but our mind interprets as we talk about light all the time, and we're seeing it as something physical coming at us, with a colour and everything else.
Yeah.
Or we can split it up into colours. Anyway, I'll finish.
So yeah, so what you're saying is there is no speed of light, but only it exists as, what was it, 8 minutes per, what was that measurement?
8 minutes to get to the Earth.
But that measurement only exists because we perceive it so
Correct.
therefore, yeah, okay, cool. So only because of that, our expectation, just like measuring the particle, measuring the wave, we see either or because that's our expectations. Like an experiment only comes true because in the way we expect it. So it's along the same path. Yeah, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're allowed to go on there.
Yeah.
Now, actually, we talking about this esoteric axis, the vertical axis. That is the important thing that physics or science hasn't seen it or hasn't recognized. Even, for example, like the tornado, there is always the difference between high pressure and low pressure. The interaction between high pressure and low pressure, and also like a plug in the bathtub, you just take off the plug and all these little tornadoes, that's all that happening, but you don't see the axis. And that the axis is the important thing. is the I, is the subject. So the galaxy formation, for example, the artist's impression, that's always this axis. This is churning the Milky Ocean from Angkor Wat. The vortex, Abraham teaching. The vortex, the human vortex. The torus, hard torus. The Anu from Leadbeater, occult chemistry. You don't see the vortex, but there is. So that's the vortex of the vertical axis that I define the interaction between spirit and matter creates the consciousness. So there's the subconscious is automatically regulating our body, temperature, digestion, everything. The unconscious from there, and our consciousness is where we focus our awareness. It's in the physical, emotional, and mental. But it's only a little spectrum of what we are conscious about compared with the whole spectrum in there.
Sorry, so you see the subconscious and the unconscious as different elements, as different.
Because in this diagram,
Yeah.
I'm using this formula, vertical axis. So that is the arupa level, so non-form, no form. This is the form. That's our.
Cool. I'm just wondering, because in the context, because I've previously known as the conscious, and then you've got the unconscious, then high conscious, but that's something else. Do you consider as unconscious maybe, like in this diagram, are you calling the, what some people call the high conscious, the spiritual, as the unconscious, so it's just different labels?
So many different names.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just-
And sometimes probably because up there
Yeah.
we are all one. The law of oneness. So the Egyptian call a circle, a loop. It's not a-
Up
I
where?
hear. Yeah, I tend to hear what you're saying. So I always thought the unconscious would be a lower vibration down at the bottom. So just my interpretation.
I probably term the unconscious superconscious,
Yeah.
some being below, super being above. It makes more sense in regard that
That's just your diagram.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah,
different
It's just
labels.
your diagram.
just
Yeah.
as the time at the beginning, my prompting. Everybody can interpret their own
Yeah.
way.
Mhm.
That's right.
So this is interesting, probably also for you. This is the axis, our center. So everything, if we are a lot of in New Age spirituality, you are in trouble. You have to center yourself. Just be centered. And the key. I'm an electrical engineer, so that's why I'm just doing this model of electrical circuits. So, for example, that's a physical circuit, emotional circuit, mental circuit, spiritual circuit. And here is all this memory pattern, and this is sensory pattern. Now, you're talking about if you don't have the memory, you don't sense that. So you can tune up in here to change that. But the key is actually to get all circuits in sync, synchronized. So if one of them is out of sync, energy is trapped and create disease. That's why physical, probably by surgery, or that's from genetic or whatever. The emotional memory, probably from trauma, you have to fix that to get the circuit in sync again, and mental depression, memory from past life or whatever, you fix it there. But the key is actually if you got all centered and all synchronized, then it's actually you as actually the source, which is can express yourself, body, emotion, thought, and you will be have a fulfilled life, happy life.
What's the veil?
That's what the veil that we cannot see that.
But why can't we see? What prevents us?
I have the answer, but I don't know whether you believe it.
It doesn't matter if I believe it, you just tell people. I'm not going to shoot you down, I just want to hear what your thought is. What's your concept of the veil?
The veil is actually to forget about the past, forget about our trauma. I've been doing some research in that, and not only book research, but also through meditation research and going back into my past lives and everything. And I came to that the explosion of planet Maldek.
Yeah, just keep, shit.
Planet Maldek, and all the people in there, or the souls in there, are trapped in the knot of fear for millions of years. Could be, I cannot assure that, probably Maldek was exploded about 66 million years ago. That's one part of the Maldek hit the earth and killed the dinosaurs in that area. And only about 500,000 years ago, that knot of fear can be entangled, and the soul is given body to experience three-dimensional experience, but then they cannot function because of the trauma. And that's why they do a genetic modification so that they forget the trauma and can function in this body. That's how I found.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough.
So sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're talking about genetic modification. My mind went somewhere else for just a moment. So you're talking genetic modification as in a large scheme, as in forget our past as our past lives, and no, you're not talking about genetic modified food, are you? Or are you talking about?
No, genetic, our gen.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Big
Yeah.
picture. Yep. Okay. Cool.
That was about 200,000 years ago.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
When the soul from Maldek starts incarnating into the earth.
You've got physical / etheric. What's the distinction for you between etheric and physical?
The etheric is actually like a mold to mold our physical body. That's the energy body. You might have a different definition on that. Yeah? I just simplified that.
Yeah. So the way I thought of it is, or the way I've read it, is that the etheric body is the energy structure which causes the physical body.
Yeah.
The physical body isn't a cause; it's an effect of the etheric.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't do anything physical. We can do things with the energy body and affect the physical body.
Yes.
So that's how I understand. I'm just wondering how that maps to. So if we talk about light, but in this quantum, so there's quite a bit of difference between physical matter and etheric, though they're highly bound. Whereas astral is a layer distracted or extracted, which is a different layer of reality. I I'm interested in why you put the veil at the level where we would normally contact soul. Whereas for most people, they can't contact mind. Well, the mental body is that thing. So you physically die, your astral body continues, that consciousness exists continually, it's a ghost. It can die and the mental body still exists and has form and has structure. So that's a state of being from which we may reincarnate or not. So I'm just interested that then you put the veil at that point, because most of us can't touch our mental body, our mind body, or even our astral body, for that.
Yeah.
Or even our etheric body. There's not many clairvoyants that can see their chakras. So where is the veil really?
No, it's actually, where is the veil?
That was a trick question.
Huh?
That was a trick question. Trick question.
Well, no, it wasn't meant to be trick. It was meant to just create a question.
You know when you said you can't touch, in Kundalini Yoga, right?
Pardon?
In Kundalini Yoga, they say you've got 10 bodies, but there is 10 exercises for each body that you get in contact.
Bodies?
Your bodies, they're 10. So they can look at that's really interesting stuff, this Kundalini Yoga. It's fantastic. It's like...
Very dangerous, yes.
It's dangerous. It's
You have what you're doing.
Yeah. No, I've got a good teacher. He's been doing it for 20 years, and there's a woman who's doing Hatha Yoga, and she's been doing it for 8 years. It's only dangerous if you have alternative motives.
If you look at the, this is a very different topic. Maybe we could get after the presentation. Yeah. Hold that.
So going back to this here, you can see also that this the horizontal axis interaction between subject and object on the physical level, on the emotional level, on the mental level, and on the spiritual level. That's when you see talking about the horizontal axis going up and going down. I just one line. You can put wherever you want.
Okay.
You said 7. Am I missing one? You said 7. 7. 7.
Was it 7? I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4. No.
6. Maybe 6.
You're talking about 7 chakras.
No, I thought you were mentioning 7. I don't know what to call them. 7.
Chakras or
Is it chakras? I thought.
No.
It's something else, isn't it? Yeah. So you just said 7 of those. So I just thought I was looking for the 7.
Or you can divide it into that, refine it, but in principle, I just get like a circuit that you can tune to get the circuit running in sync with each other. Like Perry said, if at a mental memory, you don't have the ship, you cannot see the ship. Yeah.
Can I propose something, Bun?
Yeah.
There's another way of looking at the so-called consciousness of all of us here, and it's our mind interpretation that there's a physical body here, but the consciousness itself is the same consciousness that everyone else is experiencing. So it's only the mind and its structure that has said, I am born without knowledge of anything, just vibration, until my sense data starts scanning my body and I start feeling and I find there's a limit to it. The body. Does it matter whether you live and die and that's it? Because the eyes are always being one. You can't, the universal I is you. The separate I is a construct of the mind. So when I die, this bubble in my mind has just gone up and dropped. because it's a mind concept, not an I concept. The I is the fact that the mind can read that there's such a thing as awareness. Just chuck that in, folks.
Okay, so in this diagram here, I think there's a concept that says there's consciousness in the physicalness, there's consciousness in the etheric, there's consciousness in the astral or emotional, and there's consciousness in the mind or mental layer. Then there's, above the veil, there's consciousness in something else, the spiritual with soul. But then there's a concept, well, the soul is just a unit within a group, so there's consciousnesses within that group, and then the soul group has actually belonged, it's a centre or a cell of another group. So layers of consciousness.
You've hit on something I used to think very deeply about. Yeah. I know what you're
So
saying.
I'm just trying to deal with what you just said, where the consciousness of dying in this cell doesn't mean the whole cell ceases. And so we don't become one at that point. We're still in the world of duality, in the world of creation, and we're still in the layer of matter until we pass above that veil to spiritual unity. But that doesn't map all of the layers of reality yet, does it? Are we getting to there?
We just,
Well,
getting there.
Yeah.
well, the same consciousness, if you want to play that game, what you're saying, in emotional or any of the other physical levels as a consciousness, is still the I that's universal. It's just interpreting it because it has the capacity to say, I am conscious.
I don't want to dominate the response here.
Yeah. It's up to everybody. Everybody has got background. You learn something, you have experienced something, and how you relate to this, it's your ability to relate to that. Everybody's got different interpretation, and that's supposed to be like that. That's the free will. And that's what Barry is trying to say is actually, we're coming back to that center point, the awareness within us to experience is the same center point with the awareness of the source. So the source is using